Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling alternative energy sources, a pretty hot topic right now.
Yeah, it's a big one for sure.
We've got a chapter from like a social studies textbook
Okay.
and this really interesting documentary called Breakthrough, Renewable Energy.
Sounds promising.
It is. So we're going to look at all these different ways to power the future. Everything from, the sun and wind, which we kind of know,
Right. The usual suspects.
exactly, to some really out there stuff. Like, did you know you can make energy from garbage?
Well, I mean, technically, yeah,
I know, right?
it's fascinating actually.
It is.
So the need for these alternatives is, well, it's pretty clear when you look at what's going on with traditional energy sources.
Yeah, the textbook, it really emphasizes the link between fossil fuels and, well, global warming. And it's not pretty.
No, it's not. And that's why finding alternatives is so crucial.
Absolutely. The textbook actually mentions the Kyoto Protocol. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was a big international agreement aimed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
It did, but Canada, well, we ended up withdrawing from it.
We did. The targets were, well, they were seen as unrealistic by some, and there were concerns about the economic impact.
So it seems like finding solutions is more important than ever now.
It is, absolutely. The impacts of climate change are becoming more and more apparent. We can't afford to ignore it.
Well, let's jump into those solutions then. I'm kind of fascinated by solar power. It's been around forever, but can it really power our world?
It's definitely more than just heating pools these days. Active solar power, with those solar panels you see everywhere, it's becoming more and more affordable.
Really? So it's not just for like rich people anymore.
Not at all. And even in places without tons of sunshine, passive solar power can be effective. Think about it. Buildings designed to maximize sunlight, free energy, just by being smart about how we build.
Wow, so clever. The textbook also mentioned something called photovoltaic cells
Ah, yeah, those are pretty cool. They can actually turn sunlight directly into electricity.
directly, like no middleman.
Pretty much. They even use them in Antarctica, where traditional power sources just wouldn't work.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, let's talk about wind power. Those giant turbines are hard to miss.
Right. Wind power has come a long way. It's not just about old-fashioned windmills anymore. We're talking about massive turbines, harnessing the power of the wind to generate electricity on a huge scale.
Are there any here?
Oh yeah, right here in Newfoundland and Labrador, St. Lawrence, Formuse, Remea, they all have wind farms.
It's just, I imagine those turbines must be noisy.
Yeah, noise and vibration can be concerns, and finding the right locations where the wind is strong enough but not too strong, that's important.
Makes sense. Okay, what about geothermal power? Tapping into the Earth's heat.
Exactly. Geothermal energy is incredible. Iceland, for example, gets about a quarter of its electricity from geothermal sources.
Wow, but Iceland is, well, super volcanic. Can we do that here?
Even without volcanoes, we can still harness geothermal energy from groundwater.
Groundwater.
They pump up hot water from underground, extract the heat to generate power, and then return the cooled water back. It's pretty ingenious.
That is cool. The documentary also talked about ethanol power using plants to make fuel. Sounds pretty amazing.
Ethanol is a biofuel, often made from corn. You can blend it with gasoline to help reduce emissions, but there's a downside. Using so much corn for fuel, well, it can impact food prices and even livestock feed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, now for something truly out there, biogas power, using garbage to make energy, is that really a thing?
It is. When organic waste decomposes, it releases methane gas, which can be used as fuel.
So like our trash can actually power things.
Exactly. They use these things called digesters to speed up the decay process and collect the gas. It's perfect for cities with lots of waste or farms with lots of, well, manure.
It's amazing and kind of gross at the same time. Anything else we need to know?
Well, they have to be careful about hazardous materials contaminating the biogas, so good recycling is still important.
Okay, now for something truly futuristic sounding, hydrogen fuel cells. Those sound pretty sci-fi.
They do, but they're real and they're pretty amazing. Imagine a battery that never needs charging. That's basically what a fuel cell is.
How does that even work?
Hydrogen and oxygen react to create electricity, and the only byproduct is water.
So no emissions.
Zero emissions. But the technology is still pretty expensive, so it's not widespread yet.
Okay, last but not least, tidal power. Living here, we know all about the power of the ocean. Can Can we really use that to make electricity?
Absolutely. The Bay of Fundy, with its massive tides, is a prime example. Underwater turbines are placed in areas with strong tidal currents, and as the tides flow in and out, they spin the blades, generating electricity.
So it's like an underwater windmill powered by the ocean's currents.
Exactly. Tides are predictable and consistent, so tidal power is a reliable and renewable source of energy.
It sounds ideal. Any downsides?
The initial construction costs are high, and there are concerns about the impact on marine life and coastal ecosystems, but the potential is huge.
It seems like every energy source has its pluses and minuses.
That's the thing. There's no one perfect solution. It's about finding the right mix of options to meet our needs while protecting the planet.
I get it. So all these options, it can be a bit overwhelming. What can we actually do as individuals to make a difference?
You'd be surprised. Small changes add up. Walk or bike instead of driving. Choose energy-efficient appliances, even just turning off lights when you leave a room.
The little things do matter.
They really do. And companies are starting to realize that wasting energy is wasting money, so they're investing in energy efficiency and renewable sources too.
So we're all in this together. That's encouraging.
It is. Governments are also getting on board with policies and incentives to promote clean energy. It's a collaborative effort.
So it seems like we are starting to see a shift in how we think about energy.
We are. The momentum is building, and it's exciting to be a part of this transition to a more sustainable future.
What is the biggest thing to remember for our listeners?
There is no single magic bullet. We need a combination of solutions tailored to different needs and locations.
Makes sense. So what should our listeners do with all this information?
Be curious. Dive into the topics that interest you. Explore different perspectives, and don't stop learning.
I like it. Let's give our listeners something to think about. Of all the alternative energy sources we talked about today, which one sparks your imagination the most?
That's a great question. What are the potential benefits? What are the challenges? And how could it change the world?
We've given you the starting point. Now it's your turn to explore. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, so many different energy sources.
Yeah, it's amazing how much innovation is happening in this field.
It is. And I have to say, I'm feeling optimistic. Like, we really could be on the verge of a major shift in how we power our world.
I agree. We're seeing, well, a confluence of factors driving this change. Technology is advancing, costs are coming down, people are more aware of the climate crisis, and, governments and businesses are starting to take it seriously.
Yeah, it's like we're finally realizing that how we use energy has a huge impact on the planet.
Exactly. And as we move forward, it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. What works in one place might not work somewhere else.
Makes sense. But even with all this progress, I'm sure there are still challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest is, well, intermittency. The sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow.
Right. So we need ways to store that energy when it's available so we can use it later.
Exactly. And that's where energy storage comes in. The textbook mentioned batteries, and that's definitely a key area of focus.
Yeah, I've heard about these lithium-ion batteries and flow batteries and even something called solid-state batteries.
These are all promising technologies, but we also need to explore other options like pumped hydro, using excess electricity to pump water uphill to a reservoir. Then, when we need power, we release the water and it spins turbines.
It's like nature's battery.
Exactly. And there's compressed air energy storage where we, compress air and store it in underground caverns. Then when demand is high, we release the air to drive turbines.
That sounds pretty intense.
It is. And then there's thermal energy storage, capturing heat from solar or geothermal sources and using it later for heating or to generate electricity.
So many different ways to store energy. It's incredible.
It is. And as we get better at storing energy, we can make renewable sources a more reliable and consistent part of our energy mix.
But even with storage, we still need a way to get that energy to where it's needed. And our current electricity grid, well, it wasn't designed for all these new energy sources.
You're absolutely right. The traditional grid was built for a centralized system,
Yeah.
power flowing from a few large power plants to consumers.
Yeah, that makes sense for like coal or nuclear power plants. But with renewables, we're talking about power coming from lots of different places, often from homes and businesses.
Exactly. We need to modernize the grid to handle this decentralized generation, allow for a two-way flow of electricity where homes with solar panels can, feed energy back into the grid.
So it's like every house becomes a mini power plant.
In a way, yes. And with smart grid technology, we can optimize energy distribution and make the grid more resilient and adaptable.
Okay, so we've talked about technology, but what about the people? How will this energy transition affect jobs and communities?
That's a crucial consideration. As we shift away from fossil fuels, there will be job losses in those industries. We need to provide support and training opportunities for those workers.
Right, it's got to be a fair transition.
It does. We need to invest in education, create new job opportunities, and support communities that rely on fossil fuels as they adapt to this change.
It's a complex issue, but we can't leave anyone behind.
Absolutely. And we also need to think about energy poverty. There are still many people around the world who lack access to reliable and affordable energy.
Yeah, that's a huge problem.
It is. As we transition to a more sustainable energy future, we need to make sure everyone benefits, not just those who can afford new technologies.
So it's about access, affordability, and equity.
Exactly. And that requires addressing social and economic disparities and investing in energy infrastructure in underserved communities.
Okay, so we've talked about the technical challenges, the social and economic implications, but what about the role of government?
Governments have a crucial role to play. They can create policies and incentives to encourage the development and adoption of renewable energy.
Like what kind of policies?
Things like feed-in tariffs, which guarantee a fixed price for renewable energy fed back into the grid, or tax credits for homeowners who install solar panels. And renewable energy portfolio standards, which require utilities to generate a certain percentage of their power from renewable sources.
So it's about creating a regulatory environment that supports the growth of the renewable energy sector.
Exactly. And these policies are working. We're seeing a rapid increase in renewable energy investment and deployment around the world.
It feels like the momentum is really building.
It is, and it's exciting to see the progress that's being made. But it's important to remember that this transition won't happen overnight. It's a long-term process that requires sustained effort and collaboration.
Right, we're all in this together. Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to bring it back to our listener. What can they do to be a part of this energy transition?
Well, think about your own energy consumption. Are there ways you can reduce your reliance on fossil fuels?
Maybe it's switching to energy-efficient light bulbs, or using public transportation more often, or even just being more mindful of how much energy you use at home.
Those are all great examples. And don't underestimate the power of your voice. Talk to your friends and family about these issues. Support businesses that are committed to sustainability. And let your elected officials know that you care about clean energy.
It's about taking action, both in our personal lives and in our communities.
Exactly. The future of energy is in our hands. We can all make a difference.
Wow, we've really delved deep into this world of alternative energy.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. So much to think about.
I know, I feel like I've, learned a ton, but there's still this one thing that's kind of sticking with me.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we've talked about all the technology, the science, the policies, but what about the people?
Ah, the human element. Yes, that's often overlooked. But it's absolutely essential to consider.
Right, like the textbook mentioned how some communities are pushing back against wind farms.
Yeah, those concerns about noise, visual impact, those are real. We can't just ignore them. We need to engage with communities, be transparent about the process, address their concerns.
It's about building trust,
Yeah.
right? Not just turbines.
Exactly. And the documentary, it touched on energy poverty. Millions of people around the world still lack access to reliable and affordable energy.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. We can't forget about those folks as we move towards a more sustainable future.
Absolutely. This transition needs to be just and equitable. We need to address those social and economic disparities, ensure that everyone benefits from cleaner energy.
It seems like, well, the human element is woven into every aspect of this energy transition.
It is. It's about people, their needs, their aspirations, and recognizing that we all have a role to play.
And that brings me to my final thought for our listeners. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this. Like, what can one person really do?
You'd be surprised. Those individual actions, they matter.
So, like changing our light bulbs, being more mindful of our energy use, those things actually make a difference.
Absolutely. Every bit counts. And don't forget the power of your voice. Talk to your friends, your family, your elected officials. Let them know you care about clean energy.
So it's about making choices, raising awareness, and being part of the solution.
It is. The future of energy is not some predetermined path. It's a story we're all writing together.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's remember that we all have a role to play in shaping a brighter, more sustainable future. It's a journey worth taking. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds open to the possibilities.